Kia ora, hello, and welcome to a new episode of Play Notes, the podcast where we give you the lowdown on the plays and playwrights you need to know. I'm your host, Emily Duncan.
And I'm your other host, Alison Horsley. And we are both dramaturgs, aka script advisors, aka story sallies, aka drama demons, narrative nerds.
Yeah. We tried to come up with something starting with T.
No.
But we didn't.
No.
But that's not really why we're here.
No,
so
it's
let's
not.
not beat ourselves up.
We are here to talk about Chekhov. Emily Duncan.
This is our third and final for now.
Yes.
Episode on Anton Chekhov.
And it's a twofer.
It's a twofer because we're gonna slam.
It's a fourfer, actually.
Together. A fourfer?
Well, yeah, because it's 3 and then 1. So it's a fourfer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Let's not go too far down the numerical track.
That's the extent of my numeracy.
I'm one of the hosts of this thing. Okay. So a bit has happened in Chekhov's life since Vanya. Mm-hmm. He's actually had to move away from his beloved estate that we talked about in episode 2. And he's had to move south for the sake of his health. So you'll remember that we talked about shortly after he graduated from medical school around the same time. We talked about this in episode 1. He was diagnosed with tuberculosis. And at first, he kept this from his family because he was really the family breadwinner. On top of studying and working as a doctor, he was writing these short stories and plays to support his family. So,
classic underachiever.
Yeah. So as much as possible, he was keeping that on the low down. But between writing Vanya and moving on to Three Sisters, the old consumption was really starting to consume him. So he had to move south.
Yeah, so he moved down south to Yalta. So where the air was, I don't know if that's
where there might
humid.
have been actual seagulls.
Yeah, where there were actual seagulls, but more of a resort area. So there are worse places to have to live. But as many of us know, the climate in Russia is not super, easy on the lungs. Can get very cold, especially Milikhovo, which is the state where he was living. It was like 40 miles south of Moscow, maybe, and it gets freaking cold there in the winter. So Yalta just had more of a temperate climate.
Okay, and can you visit the Yalta house as well? I think
so. Yeah, and still very much a tourist destination. I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Yeah. So, Three Sisters, a drama. And 4 acts. And I think this is important to point out because one of the generalizations we sometimes hear about Chekhov is that his plays are actually comedies.
Right.
They're meant to be really funny.
Yeah.
But he called this a
drama.
Called
this a drama. Yeah. And Cherry Orchard, when we get to Cherry Orchard, that is called a comedy. But yeah, Three Sisters, absolutely a drama. I mean, I don't think there's a duel in Three Sisters. Like, I don't think ain't no duels in comedy, you know? Yeah. So
Okay.
definitely more of a drama.
And while he may call it a drama, I refer to it as Masha 2.0 in black.
Yes.
Or the big fire of Little Consequence.
Yeah, yes, I was going to say, it's like a little fire, actually. So we call it Masha, or Emily calls it Masha 2.0 because this is Masha number 2.
Yeah, so there's a Masha in The Seagull who says the line that people, even if you haven't read the play, you might have familiar of. Someone says to her, "Why are you always in black?" And she says, "I'm in mourning for my life."
Yeah, and this Masha isn't that different, actually. It's just this Masha... Also, she has an affair.
She also marries a
school teacher.
The trope of the chap who never leaves.
Well, and she marries a school teacher here, and as does Masha and Seagull.
Yes.
Who marries boring school teacher.
Yes.
So there's the chap, the trope that never leaves. The chap that never leaves.
So really fast.
There's the doctor who often is like a heavy drinker.
Yes.
And there's often like a boring ass school teacher.
Yeah.
Nothing against teachers. I've done that before. But in Three Sisters, he's a boring ass school teacher. Who she marries.
The chap who never leaves. As if that rule of get in late, get out early just it never applies to them. They
No.
don't know when to leave.
No, they don't know when to leave. And then when they do leave, they talk about how hard it's going to be to leave.
Yeah. I can't get any horses. No, it's okay. I can walk.
I'll just walk the 4 miles home. It's fine. The baby's hungry, but don't worry.
Yeah.
You stay here. You know, it's very...
I've just come back to tell you about. Don't worry about me.
Yeah.
Tell a bit about it.
Yeah.
A point of difference with the three sisters
Yeah.
is that half the cast, or half the characters, are army officers.
Yeah, and you do not see, like, this is the only major Chekhov play where you've got, like, this kind of military presence. It's really, to me, this play is such an anomaly among his other really successful plays. I mean, you've got 3 women who are the leads. You've got Irina, Masha, and Olga, who are the Prozorov sisters, and their brother Andrei. Sort of like a vowel, sort of like the Y of the, anyway. So it's like the 3 sisters. And then, there's like all these military dudes. And their father was a military guy. But you don't see this like structure happen elsewhere in Chekhov. They're usually like landowners, they're peasants, they're servants, stuff like that. And this is like the one military play. And you've got a duel in it, and there's this freaking offstage fire that happens that has virtually no dramaturgical impact on the rest of the play.
I was saying to you before we started recording, if I was the dramaturg on this and I had to pick a first thing to cut, it's like, why the fire?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, so
why the fire?
We should probably give them a summary of 3 sisters really quickly.
Okay.
All right, so you want to start?
We've got 3 sisters.
Yep.
They are, like the other players, living on an estate. They're not in Moscow. And
they don't like that they're not in Moscow.
No, yeah. And it starts on, is it the Saint's Day?
Of Irina. Yeah, she's the youngest.
Yes. And this is one of my favourite lines from the play was, she's gifted, it's by the teacher, brother-in-law, isn't it?
Yes.
Book. And she says, you already gave me that for Easter.
Yeah.
So they're all here, and throughout the play, they're wanting to leave.
Yeah.
And they just, it never really happens.
Yeah, they just can't. So the 3 girls are kind of stuck, they're women by now. They're kind of stuck in this town. And it's a military outpost, which is why all the military dudes are coming through. And the play ends basically when that military detachment has to leave again. So it's a little like the end of Vanya.
With none of the sisters with them.
None of the sisters with them. So there's the 3 women. So there's Irina, who in the course of the play forms a relationship with Tuzenbach, who repeatedly is like, I'm a Russian, I'm Russian, even though I have a German name, but I'm totally Russian. So she has had a relationship with Tuzenbach, and he is eager and really loves her, and she's agreed to marry him. And then he goes into this duel with Solyoni, who's just like nutballs, who the whole play, he's just talking shit.
Sound effects and such.
Yeah, he's like just the crazy dude who talks shit and wants to pick fights with people. And so he makes fun of
just
Tuzenbach.
Antagonizing.
Yeah, he just does that. Yeah. And so he apparently antagonizes Tuzenbach to such an extent that Tuzenbach
I'll duel you then.
Yeah, says I'll duel you, and Solyoni shoots and kills Tuzenbach. So Irina at the end of the play doesn't have a fiance anymore. Masha, her older sister, who has married a school teacher, the boring one, has started like a heated affair with Vershenyin,
who's also married. Daughters.
Who has daughters and a problematic wife who also multiple times attempts suicide. Yeah, in the course of the play. So they're hot and heavy, and so of course he leaves at the end of the play because his military detachment or whatever has moved on. And then there's Olga, who doesn't have a romantic relationship in the course of the play, but she's kind of like Mama Bear. She's holding
tired.
Yeah, because she's holding down the fort, Like
she reminds me. There's a character in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name, but he was saying, "I'm tired.
Oh yeah,
I'm tired." That's Olga's his predecessor.
I think so. And then there's the sister's brother, Andrei, who ends up settling down with a lovely lady. Emily, you want to tell us about her?
Oh, well, yeah, she's sort of, this is going to sort of blow out my favourite part of the play, so that's fine. Okay. In a way, she's my favourite character because of her character arc. She moves from mousy to meddling to mega bitch. Like, it's so much fun.
Yes.
I think it'll be such a joy to play.
Yeah, that would be such
Natasha.
a fun part. Yeah, Natasha.
Yeah.
And she's cheating on Andre by the end.
Yes.
I mean, so she's like small town girl who kind of like makes it big and then is like all about herself.
When we first meet her, one of the sisters comments on what she's wearing and says that you don't want to be wearing that. Oh. And then in the last act, she comments on one of the sisters and says, "You don't want to really be wearing that."
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah,
and this play to me feels like Chekhov's Tolstoy play. I don't know if it like this play.
And they were friends, weren't they?
Yeah, they definitely knew each other, and like they were, but this play feels more like 19th century Russian literature to me than it does a regular play. But that's my take on it. And also because he references Soleoni at one point says, "Oh, people say I look like Lermontov. I remind people of Lermontov, who famously antagonized a guy so much that the guy shot and killed Lermontov in a duel."
Right.
Lermontov was a famous Russian writer. So in this case, it's just the reverse, that Tuzenbach isn't, unfortunately doesn't kill Soleoni, but it's the opposite. But there's just a strong literary kind of heritage in this play. And like there is no duel in Russian literature that doesn't harken back to the duel in Eugene Onegin.
Right.
In Pushkin's Eugene Onegin. So it's just like, I don't know, so it's weird. Just a lot of echoes in this play in from other Russian literature.
Three Sisters was produced. It was written and produced at the turn of the 20th century, 1901. And something I noticed in it is, whereas in his other plays he references trees a lot, there's quite a few references to technology that stood out. And one I wondered, there's a photograph actually taken on stage, and I wondered if this is one of the earliest examples of a photograph taken on stage. One of the sisters works at a telegraph office. There's references to air balloons. It feels very of its time, interestingly. Like, and it's funny, like, even though I was just saying it feels like a 19th century novel, it feels, despite the women's isolation, this play feels very connected to the rest of the world. And maybe it's because of the military thing and the photography thing. But yeah, I mean, even like people are giving each other gifts from town, like somebody gives Irina like colored pencils. There's just something material about it that feels... Yeah, that's a good way. Yeah,
more material. Modern and immediate. I don't know what it is.
More of a consumer culture.
Yeah, maybe so.
Shining
and all
through.
Gets burned down in the fire that makes no difference to anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a big fire, and it just doesn't impact anything.
So I've shared my favorite bit, and before we move on to Cherry Orchard,
the big last one.
Do you have a favorite bit of Masha 2.0?
Yeah,
to share?
I do, and and this is a lot of people's favorite lines, but it's one of Irina's lines. She's just having, I think it's Irina, who's just having a meltdown, and she says, "I don't remember the Italian for window," and she's just like that. She doesn't remember the Italian for window.
It's like an overtired child moment.
Yes, and we all have days like that where you
like
don't
the fire.
remember. Yeah, the fire doesn't matter, but the Italian,
that is. Oh right, the Cherry Orchard.
No,
I did mine because I talked about Natasha. I've already done it, Alice.
No, but like the baby.
Did I have another one?
Yeah.
Oh, there's a line about Natasha is banging on about the baby, and one of the officers says something about sautéing it in a pan.
Yes,
and it's what she deserves as a comeback at that point. I'm not.
Yeah, that's true. We don't advocate sautéing babies.
But
not at all.
It comes about time.
Yeah. All right.
So Cherry Orchard, written in 1904, a comedy.
Yes, the last play
that I refer to as the You Can't Stop Progress play.
Yeah.
If you're familiar with the film Muriel's Wedding, or the NIMBY play, because not in my backyard.
Yes.
Yeah.
And and to me, I think in my mind, it's like the actually paying for all those avocado toasts does mean that you can't buy a house.
Too many lattes.
Yes. So, All right, so Cherry Orchard, so it was actually written in 1903, premiered at the Moscow Art Theater in January of 1904.
Did he get to see, Chekhov, did he get to see it, do we know, before he ended up in the oyster carriage?
You know
which
what?
People want to look up if they don't
I'm
know.
having a moment. I think he did. I think he did go.
I think he did too.
Because I think that they did a big stand-up applause thing between a couple of the acts for him.
And there's like, now I have to go now to the spa in Germany.
Yeah. And then he died like 6 months later.
Right.
And I think he died in July.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, I think he was there, and I feel like if I'm wrong, I regret this so hard. Mm-hmm. But we all know this feeling of not being able to remember something that should be really important because you're on the spot.
I think you're right.
Yeah, I think he was there.
He just saw it. Would have been the last of his plays he got to see.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, that was the last play he wrote.
Yeah.
And it was rehearsed largely in his absence. So with this play more than the others, there are parts of the play known as variants that were cut at one point or another, either cut by the censors. Because it wouldn't get by the censors, because the censors were...
What sort of things wouldn't get by a censor back then? I think one we used as an example for, well, we didn't, but you used with me when we were discussing this for the Seagull, is I had said, how much am I meant to understand that Masha might be the doctor in that play's daughter?
Right,
and I think you said to me, well... That's something that if it was explicit, it wouldn't get past the censors.
Yeah.
So what might be something in Cherry Orchard that...
Wouldn't
might
get
not
by?
have got, yeah.
Anything,
on spot.
Anything talking too explicitly about Lyubov Andreevna's relationships, like her sexual relationships in the past. Like she talks about how she was with this guy who died of champagne, and all these things. But anything that's too explicit about sex tends to get cut. So Seagull, it's a little edgy because Arkadna and Trigorin are living together, but like they couldn't imply that too much,
right?
Because that implies that they're having sex.
Okay.
And yeah, anything that is politically too racy. So in Cherry Orchard, Trofimov has a couple speeches which are very politically progressive and quite liberal. So stuff like that would have been a lot harder to get past the censors if it was advocating revolution in any way. And so a couple of his speeches were censored as well. So yeah, anything involving sex, politics, any profanity would be cut. So in Libby Apple's adaptations, which both of us read for this podcast, we include the word like hell here and there, and that's not something that's in Chekhov's play.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so there are times when it comes toward that, but it just, no profanity in the plays.
And have you also found that Stanislavski, in addition, really messed with the script?
Yeah, so Stanislavski felt much more like Cherry Orchard was a tragedy. He was trying to bring out the drama in it, for sure, whereas Chekhov was trying to make it more of a comedy. And so Stanislavski, like
You've got ventriloquism in this play.
I know, exactly, but that's what's so funny about it, that Stanislavski wanted it to be much more like the love story between Anya and Trofimov. And he wanted to make it a bit sappier, whereas, then you've got the characters of like Lyubov and Gaev, who are a bit silly sometimes. Not that we don't sympathize with them, but Gaev is eating candy the whole time and talking to cupboards. It's kind of ridiculous. But Stanislavski was trying to take it very seriously, and so and make it a bit more realism based, I think, than what Chekhov even wanted at that point, because he was starting to depart and go more towards symbolism. So we had talked in one of the other episodes about how Chekhov infused his plays with these sound effects, and in Cherry Orchard it shows up a couple of times. But I just realized we should probably do a summary of Cherry Orchard. Yeah.
So we're on a Cherry Orchard.
Yeah.
That belongs to
Lyubov Andreevna and her brother Gaev.
Yes.
So Lyubov is her first name, Andreevna is her patronymic, but yeah.
And she's not there when the play opens. We're sort of waiting for her rival.
Yeah. It's funny. It's like in Chekhov's plays, he tends to not do that many of these like 19th century butler maid conversations at the beginning, where it's like, oh, don't you remember that the madam, has been in Europe for a while? Oh, do you remember her name? Like that kind of stuff.
Big
like,
blatant servings of exposition.
Yeah, exactly. But Cherry Orchard starts like that. It's like literally, it's like, she's coming back today. But in this case, it's a maid and a man named Lopakin who had grown up as a serf on the property, and the serfs were liberated in 1861. Or he grew up as
the son of
a serf on the property, and he has become a more successful businessman in the time since then. So they start out,
and there's also the adopted daughter there as well.
Yeah, so Lyubov Andreevna has a biological daughter, Anya, who has been in Paris with Lyubov Andreevna. And then there's Varya, who's the adopted daughter, who sort of manages the estate. She's more of the workhorse.
She's similar to Sonia in that sense, and Vanya.
Yeah, Varya in Cherry Orchard, Varya is the one who has all the keys to everything.
Yeah.
She's like the
Which at one point she'll throw down on the...
Yeah, she's the even-keeled... practical person in all of this, whereas Lyubov Andreevna is much more kind of head in the clouds, romantic. So Lyubov Andreevna had also had a son who drowned on the property, and so
a tutor shows up.
Yeah. So Lyubov Andreevna had a son named Grisha. She and Anya go off to Paris. She's like sleeping with this dude in Paris, stuff like that.
But they went off to Paris after the son
drowned. After the son drowned.
Yeah.
And so she's just now coming back for the first time in 6 years, something like that. So they're coming back, and so the dead son's tutor has come back to say hello, of course being totally unaware of the kind of impact that he's going to have on the grieving mother of his late pupil. So he comes back, and also there is Gaev, who's Lyubov's brother, who lives there all the time. And then Lyubov brings also her servant Yasha back, and
Charlotta.
Oh, and along with Charlotta, who is a governess. So she's a German governess who does magic tricks and has a little dog.
Yeah.
Like you do.
And at one point, so there's this theme throughout of sort of transience and unmooring. And the Charlotte character, to my mind, really sort of personifies this. At one point she says she doesn't have a passport and she doesn't know what her date of birth is. And she's sort of a magician character, and she can mimic people. At one point she pretends to be holding a baby that's crying, and
Yeah, she can make people appear and disappear behind like curtains and stuff, like that thing everybody was doing with their pets, like, the Instagram thing. So they're on this estate. They've come back to this estate, and the pressing issue is that the estate is out of money, and the property is going to be auctioned in August. And Lopakin, who's the businessman now, is like, hey, there's totally a solution for this. You just sell off the orchard, and then
build summer houses.
And
this is the NIMBY, you can't stop progress.
Yeah. This is the way things are going, and because this is really the Chekhov play that best reflects the coming revolution. He's saying, look, this system is crumbling. The system that we were all living under is crumbling. It's time to step into progress. And of course, Lyubov and Gaev are like, oh no, we can't sell the orchard. It's our orchard. Even though it doesn't even really produce that much anymore. And also the type of cherries that these were the type of cherries, they're like cooking cherries. So they're not even necessarily like immediate eating cherries.
Right.
They're more sour,
Okay.
So,
there isn't an immediate value in that sense.
Yeah. It's like somebody else has to be done with them. So, so they don't want to sell the property. The property goes up to auction.
They don't really want to do anything about it.
No, they don't want to do anything. No, and they keep hoping that their aunt will give them money and that will save it. But yeah, very unrealistic, But at the time, for people who are that type of aristocracy, they wouldn't have had any other sense anyway. It just wasn't part of their world. So this is the advanced version of the estate, or this is the logical conclusion of where things were going with these estates that had serfs on them at one point. And the other character in all of this is Fears, who had been a serf on the property, who is an old man now, who's very loyal to the family, and he's still living on the property. So anyway, auction happens. Lopakin goes to the auction, and he buys the cherry orchard, and comes back and reports this. And, of course, Lyubov Andreevna is devastated, and he has a moment where he
And Varya throws the keys.
And Lopakin, though, has this moment where he kind of loses himself and is like, watch as I chop down every last tree on this property where my ancestors were serfs.
So stop talking about it while
they're like, shh, she's crying, stop it. And he's like, oh shit, right.
Read the room, buddy.
But that, for me, that's like my favorite moment in the play is when this person has just gone to such an extreme and not read the room at all. So anyway, so the play is not necessarily a comedy as we would think of a comedy being, but it ends with the family leaving, with the understanding that Fears has been taken to the hospital.
Oh, yes. And multiple times this is referred to.
Yeah, because
he's been taken to the hospital.
Yeah, okay. Yasha, the young servant, who's kind of an asshole, who has gone with Lyubov Andreevna to Paris and now is about to go back to Paris with her, is like, oh, yeah, we've taken care of him. And then at the very end of the play, the family leaves and locks the house, and no one's going to be back in the house for months. They're chopping down the orchard, and then they're going to knock down the house. The family locks the door, and then Fears like shuffles on stage and is like, oh, I think they forgot me. And he gives this little speech, and then he lays down on the couch or the divan and is motionless. So there are different interpretations. Some people think that he dies. Some people think that he's just laying there, and then just the lights go down. But anyway, it's like heartbreaking and funny and heartbreaking.
Yeah. We talked a bit about sound.
Oh,
There's one of the sounds that recurs, well, doesn't recur, but in the play is that the tapping of the axe on the trees.
Yeah, that's another read the room buddy moment where at the end of the play, they're starting to chop down the orchard in Act 4 while the family is still there. And they have to say, like, hey, can you stop chopping down the orchard, while we're still here? And Lopakin is like, oh yeah, totally, yeah, and he goes out and to tell them to stop chopping,
and it starts up again later
and then
on.
It starts up again like the very end of the play.
Have we talked about the string breaking?
No, we haven't.
Okay, so what do we make if it happens? It occurs twice in the play, the sound of a string breaking.
Yeah, so one of the times it happens is in the dead center of the play. And it's and
someone refers to it, don't they? Or they refer to hearing a sound?
Yeah, they all interpret it differently. So Trofimov is like, maybe it was an owl, and Fears is like, oh yeah, we used to hear that sound before the liberation of the serfs. He doesn't say that, but I think he calls it before the Troubles or something. But everybody has a different interpretation of what the sound is. But it's the string snap or the string breaking that people have heard of it about Chekhov, that's a thing that happens in this play. What it actually is the sound of a cable car snapping. And that was the sound that...
In like a mine?
In a mine, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and apparently that wasn't an uncommon sound.
Right.
For where he grew up. But once you include it in a play, all of a sudden it has meaning, and so some people say that it's the... it's the old ways breaking, it's whatever cord or tendon tied us to the old
that
regime.
Last connect.
Yeah.
Sort of frayed and snapped. I was really struck by, in your translation, in this version of the play, I noticed it more this time, how in the setting, the stage direction, descriptions, there is of the city on the horizon that you can see in some weather. It's much more explicit, the wider world, and an industrial world as well.
Yeah. There's a line of telegraph poles.
Yes.
That you see, like
the vanishing point or perspective, and yeah.
Yeah. So he's very much setting it in the context of the world, and that's the NIMBY thing. It gives you a sense that that there is another world that's about to come into this one.
Closer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this play, I mean, it's disputed because it's, it was a favorite of the Soviets because it proved that the old guard had to go, and make way for progress.
The tide is turning.
Yeah. But you can also read it as a great tragedy because it's the loss of this old world mentality. So it sort of depends. It's like a Rorschach test in a way. You can see in it what you want to see in it. But it's, it's also trademark Chekhov, and then it's got people who have dreams and wishes and unrealistic goals and love triangles.
And not great at acting on it.
Not great at acting on it.
It's a failed rom-com storyline.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's a moment where you think that things could change if Lopakhin. Yeah, it's a scene toward the end where Lopakhin has a chance to propose to Varya. And then you have a sense, I mean, I don't know that it would save the estate necessarily, but it could do something.
Save the people.
Yeah, and
she has this line where she says, she's talking about something else, but she says, our thermometer was broken. And it's just, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good summary of their lives.
Exactly what's going on here.
Yeah, and then and in the moment where he could say something, somebody off stage calls for him, and he's like, okay, yep, and
gotta go.
Then he's gone.
Yeah.
And it's this like moment where everybody just exhales, and you go, oh God, there it went. There's just nothing now. And that said, it's actually it's such a wonderful play to work on and watch because the parts are so good. And everyone is so steeped in their own...
There are no dud parts.
There are no dud parts at all. I mean, none of them.
So on that happy note,
we
always finish with our favourite bits.
I mean, for mine, I gotta say, I think it's that moment. I mean, it's terrible, but it's the moment when Lopakhin just lets himself go and inappropriately goes off about how now this place is his. And there's something so awful about that and yet so pure, about that expression.
Very honest.
Yeah, it's just
that
very
emotional
honest.
Truth.
Yeah, it is. And it's so devastating, but it's so good. I mean, and in Stephen Karam's adaptation of Cherry Orchard, he uses the word slave instead of serf. And in the production that it was written for, it like race played into it very specifically and obviously. And Lopakhin was played by a black man,
right,
by an African-American man. And so suddenly you have the sense that it's a different type of progress that's happening, and so that, again, talking about adaptation, it just reframes it for a different perspective, and I know there have been productions in New Zealand where Lopakhin is more of a Maori character,
right.
Okay. So, yeah. So anyway, what was your favorite part?
For me, it's the character of Fears. It's spelt furs,
yes,
but it's Fears.
Yeah, like the fir tree.
Yes. Yeah. He sees in Act 1, I'm so happy, now I could die. And it's just funny. It's like, really, dude, this is what you're living for?
Yeah.
And he has this other moment where he talks, it's this very dark tale. In the middle of it, he's talking about his youth being connected to a murder. And the way he tells it, you're not entirely clear how implicated he really was. Which is, so it is... takes from thinking he's sort of this doddery old, too nostalgic man to someone with some really quite dark, sinister secrets. Yeah.
And that's one of the variants as well.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay. So that's our Chekhovs.
Yeah, that's the Chekhovs. We recommend you go and read them or produce them. Yeah, they're fun. They're interesting.
Yeah.
So stick around. We'll be back for a few interviews with some New Zealand playwrights coming up.